afternoon, everybody, and Happy New Year to you. Hope everybody had a good holiday season. Good chance to take a break. My gift to you for the new year is that I do not have an opening statement, so we will get right after it. Go ahead, sir.
I'd like to start in North Korea. Kim Jong-un in his New Year's address said that North Korea was preparations for doing an ICBM test for reaching the final stage.
Yeah.
Wondered if you had any reaction to that, and if you've any indication that a test is a missile test of some sort is in the works.
Well, as I think you know, generally we don't talk about intelligence matters or intelligence assessments with respect to specifics about the capabilities that they continue to pursue, both on the ballistic missile side and, of course, on the nuclear side. So I'm not going to get into characterizing or confirming the veracity of the comments in his New Year's speech. What I will do, though, is, as we have before, continue to call on the DPRK to refrain from provocative actions and inflammatory rhetoric that threaten international peace and stability, and we want them to make the strategic choice to fulfill their international obligations and commitments and return, frankly, to the six-party talk process. There have been multiple UN Security Council resolutions that explicitly prohibit North Korea that launches using ballistic missile technology. They are still in effect, and we continue to call on all states to use every available channel and means of influence to likewise make clear to the DPRK and its enablers that launches using ballistic missile technology are unacceptable, and of course also to take steps to show and to prove that there are consequences to this unlawful conduct. So we're certainly aware of what he said. We're obviously aware of the capabilities they continue to pursue, and that's why the United States continues to work with the international community to hold Pyongyang to account for the pursuit of these capabilities and for the instability that they're contributing to. I would remind that the sanctions regime put in place recently is the most stringent over the last 2 decades, and that they are being implemented. So I guess we're just going to have to, we're going to have to obviously watch this going forward. But the international community is clearly galvanized like it hasn't been before.
Do you have any way to convey these ideas directly to North Korea at this point?
Well, we don't have direct diplomatic relations with the North. But frankly, I mean, in a sense, we're doing it now as we do when we talk about this publicly, and we certainly have made these exact concerns and these exact statements well known and clear through the UN and the UN Security Council.
Quickly, can I follow up on that one? So Blinken is meeting with his counterparts from Japan and South Korea
Later this week, yes.
Those talks were already scheduled before
Yes.
the statement. But is there anything that is there anything you can do, or the way the discussion could go, given this latest statement?
Well, I mean, first of all, Leslie, I think it's safe to assume that North Korea will be on the agenda in these trilateral talks, and this is, I think, the 6th round of these deputy foreign minister trilateral talks, and the deputy's very much looking forward to it. No question that tensions on the Korean Peninsula will be a topic of discussion. Where that's going to take us, what's going to be said, especially in light of Kim Jong-un's speech, I don't know. I can tell you that we'll obviously be providing a readout of the discussion, and so when it happens on Thursday after it's over, we'll be happy to do that.
And then what is the U.S. assessment? I know you say you don't talk about intelligence, but what if he's lying? I mean, what if this is just an empty threat? What is your assessment? I mean, is he close to Is this the last stage, or is it
I
just?
think my understanding is that, again, we don't talk about intelligence issues. So that's one. Number two, we do continue to believe that he continues to pursue both nuclear and ballistic missile technologies. I mean, that's pretty apparent. We do not believe that he, at this point in time, has the capability to tip one of these with a nuclear warhead. That's as far as I'm going to go in terms of assessing. But we do know that he continues to want to have those capabilities, and the programs continue to march in that direction, which is why, quite frankly, that the whole international community is as galvanized as it is to try to deter and to stop that. Now, yes, there's a very stringent sanctions regime in place, no question about that. Sanctions take a long time to work, we know that. Sanctions are only as good as they are enforced, and in past sanctions regimes, it hasn't always been uniformly enforced. China has said they will enforce these, and that's our expectation, that they will do that. I will also remind that that there is a military component to the Asia-Pacific rebalance that the United States has pursued, and we have the majority of the U.S. Navy in the Pacific region. We've moved special radars into place. We have missile defense capabilities of our own in that part of the world. So it's not as if we're relying solely on simply sanctions regimes to exert the proper pressure on Pyongyang. We've obviously taken and will continue to take the kinds of measures that we believe is important for our own national defense.
And since the statement on Sunday, has there been any discussions with China in the meantime about this?
I don't have any discussions with China to read out with respect to this particular speech. But if that changes, we can let you know.
The apparent
We'll stay.
determination.
I think we're staying on North Korea.
Yeah, the apparent determination of Kim Jong Un to pursue the ICBM, in despite of what you described as a stringent sanctions regime, is that because the sanctions didn't convince him, or because they haven't been adequately enforced?
I can't get inside his head and tell you
They've been
what
adequately enforced.
they are being enforced, and what I would say is we're constantly monitoring the enforcement across the international community. I can't stand here and tell you that they're being perfectly enforced by every single nation, but the general sense is that they are being implemented. It is a kind of thing that constantly needs to be evaluated, monitored, and discussed at the UN, and I know that it is. For our part, we certainly are, and we expect every other nation to do the same. What decision matrix Kim Jong-un is using to continue to explore this technology, I really can't speak to. But what I can speak to is, as he continues to pursue those, the international community is going to continue to stay galvanized against that, because it's not just destabilizing for the peninsula, it's destabilizing for the region and the world.
But if they are being adequately enforced and it hasn't stopped him, then you need stronger sanctions or another option.
Well, we haven't ruled out the possibility of additional sanctions. In fact, in light of the most recent test, there were discussions at the UN, and I've certainly, first of all, let's not get ahead of where we are. We've seen a speech, and we've seen some rhetoric. I'm not in a position to say one way or another that leads to something imminent right now. So we need to stay where we are and where things are, and we know that he continues to pursue this. So we will certainly continue to explore options to increase, if needed, the international pressure on Pyongyang. The second thing I say is that, and this, sanctions take time. He has obviously proven impervious to sanction pressure in the past because he continues to explore these capabilities. But it doesn't mean that, at least for the United States part, that we're simply relying on sanctions and sanctions alone. As I said, there is a robust U.S. military presence in the Pacific region, in the North Pacific region specifically. We have ironclad security commitments there on the peninsula with Republic of Korea allies that we take very, very seriously. And so, I mean, it's the entire U.S. government here is rightly, as we should be, focused on this growing threat.
You've called for a return to six-party talks. Obviously, the Iran nuclear deal came out of multilateral talks. But parallel to that, as we now know, the United States engaged directly with Iran. And it was seen by many outside observers that the bilateral ties between Iran and the United States were what bore fruit and brought around the Peak 5+1 deal for the JCPOA. Has there been any discussion about direct contacts between Washington and Pyongyang on this issue?
I would say, just in answer to that, our focus continues to be on returning to the six-party process. We'll go to, you want to go to that, and then I'll go to you, James. Are you still on North Korea?
I'm on North Korea.
Okay, so Steve and then
Yeah,
James.
following up on six-party talks, you mentioned, you called for them to return to that process. Is that without preconditions?
It has always been. I mean, we want them to return, but the condition is that they have to commit to a verifiable denuclearization of the peninsula. That's always been the case. If that's what you mean by preconditions, nothing's changed in that regard. You know, they've got to be able to commit to denuclearization of the peninsula, and they have proven obviously unwilling to do that and unwilling to return to the process.
Just a few different categories on this subject, if you would. First, is it the view of the department that China is doing all it can do to rein in North Korea's nuclear ambitions?
Chinese officials have made clear that they intend to implement the resolution. And we're engaged with an ongoing dialogue with them to that end, as well as our allies and our partners on how to best curtail the DPRK's pursuit of nuclear, ballistic missile, and proliferation programs.
I didn't ask if it is the view of the department that China is doing everything it can to comply with the resolution. I asked if it is the view of this department that China is doing all it can do.
No, I understand the question. I'll leave my answer as it is.
Is it fair to say that China is doing nothing on the North Korean problem, as,
No,
as President-elect tweeted?
I would not, we would not agree with that assessment.
The Chinese Foreign Ministry said today, apparently in response to the President-elect's tweet, that we hope all sides can refrain from speaking or doing anything that can aggravate the situation. Is it the view of the department that the President-elect's tweets are in fact aggravating this situation?
We're not taking a position on the President-elect's tweets with this or any other issue. What we are concerning ourselves with, James, is continuing to see international pressure being applied to Pyongyang to make the right decisions. And as I said, the international community is galvanized like it's never been before. Does that mean that every country is implementing every single one of the sanctions that are in place on any or every given day? Of course not. But that doesn't mean that we don't want to see that happen. And it doesn't mean that the sanctions that are being implemented are in fact still the most stringent that have been in place in the last 20 years. So it is, what I will say about China is that it is clear that they are absolutely concerned about the direction that Pyongyang is taking. And one shouldn't be surprised by that. I mean, the DPRK is a southern neighbor, and they share a border. They have been concerned about sanctions in the past because their southern provinces do direct business in North Korea. But they did sign up to these very robust sanctions. And And they have publicly committed to implementing those sanctions, and that's going to be our expectation going forward.
Two last questions. To your knowledge, has any official inside the Obama administration at any point taken any steps to initiate direct diplomacy with North Korea?
Not to my knowledge, James.
Lastly, is it the view of the department that, or let me rephrase that, does the Secretary of State proceed from the assumption that Kim Jong-un is a rational actor?
Does the Secretary of State presume that?
Proceed from the assumption that in attempting to deal with this regime in whatever mechanisms we use, that he is dealing with a rational actor?
It is. It's difficult when you look at the decisions that that he is making, the programs that he is pursuing, in the face of international will against him. It's difficult to understand, as I said to Dave, the rationale in making those decisions and in pursuing those programs, which are clearly coming at the expense of his own people, clearly coming at the expense of security and stability around him and his own citizens and in the region. But I don't believe that we are pursuing the options that we are pursuing based on a litmus test or a view or a personal assessment of his psychology and the degree to which he's rational on any given day. We are, however, pursuing these options based squarely on what we see in his actions. It's hard to get inside his head, but it's pretty easy to see from his actions. I mean, this is a man, mind you, that executes his own officials using anti-aircraft gunnery.
What does that tell you?
It tells me that, and I think it tells the world, that he is utterly brutal, and continues to rule with an iron fist, and because of what you can gather from his actions and the brutality, obviously, that he's capable of, and continues to demonstrate, that you have to take him seriously when he issues threats, and we do. We always do. So I know I didn't perfectly answer your question because I didn't. It's not that we're looking at this from a psychological perspective, but we certainly are judging him based on his actions, and his actions bespeak utter brutality. And we have to assume that that is the basis of the decisions that is at least a part of the basis of his decisions going forward.
Yeah, please.
Sorry.
Are we done with Korea?
Just one more.
Okay.
So has this recent statement accelerated anything as far as THAAD deployment?
I have no operational decisions to read out to you one way or another. I would refer you to my counterparts at the Defense Department to speak specifically to that, because I'm just not, I'm not really informed enough to know where the discussions are on THAAD. You'd have to talk to the Pentagon. Okay. You still in Korea? You have one more?
You mentioned that the U.S. doesn't believe that North Korea has the capability to
tip
put a nuclear
one,
warhead on one of its
to
missiles.
tip one, yeah.
Does that mean any kind of missile, a short-range missile, a mid-range?
I think I'm just going to leave it at that. I'm going to leave my statement where it was.